5. Idyll in Alexandria.
Ye gods, lass, and what do you think you're doing?
Charlotte hardly had the energy to look up as she began to undress. Her eyes were bleary, barely making out the formidable outline in the doorway. The plump figure stood over her, hands on hips.
By the saints, what have you done to those fine slippers? Take them off this second before they are destroyed altogether.
Only Mrs. Givens would give a care in the world about shoes. With a groan, Charlotte toppled back onto the bed and let it drop to the floor. She could hear Mrs. Givens' horrified intake of breath as they were scooped up and inspected, knowing too well that this would be the beginning of one of the old woman's famous Irish tirades.
Would her ladyship mind telling me what you've been doing in these fine slippers? Never before have I seen—
Charlotte's hand closed around a fine goose-down pillow and squashed it over her head to block out the barrage of words.
Please, Mrs. Givens, not tonight. I just don't think I can bear any more.
Suddenly aware of the conspicuous silence, she peeked out from under the pillow. Mrs. Givens extended a plump hand, her grey eyes grave with concern.
Aye, lass, by the look of ye, I'm inclined to believe it. But at the very least she should be getting you out of that fine frock. And the leaves from your hair.
Charlotte could not help but detect the mischievous twinkle in the old woman's eyes. She clambered to her feet.
I know what you are doing, Mrs. Givens, but I'm not talking. It's gotten me in enough trouble for one evening.
She slid her arms from the satin puffs on her shoulders. The only thing I know with absolute certainty is that I've had enough of men's games.
Is that so?
The old woman's fingers released the last hook of her corset and untied the ribbons of the shimmering skirt. It slid to a pool at her feet.
I don't know what is going through that overheated brain of yours.
Charlotte let the corset slide to the floor.
If you don't mind, I think I shall finish undressing myself tonight, Mrs. Givens.
Charlotte kissed the scowl on the weathered cheek.
Please, if you insist, miss,
the old woman conceded, with some disappointment. She deftly pushed a strand of hair from Charlotte's face.
You're a good girl, you are. Just headstrong.
Mrs. Givens retreated to the door, slippers dangling. Charlotte wearily let her head loll back. Briefly, the image of her bedroom illuminated in garish light flashed through her mind.
Mrs. Givens, did you leave my bedroom door open tonight?
Mrs. Givens snorted with indignation.
Most certainly not, miss.
As if to emphasize the point, she closed it behind her back with a forceful bang. Charlotte stood in her chemise, then turned to the window, captivated by the slow crawl of fog outside. She pressed her hands against her chest, where the corset had been. Such a strange night. Nothing made sense now, not even the sanctuary of her own bedroom. Charlotte wearily blinked away the niggling image at the open door. She would have to chide Mrs. Givens tomorrow. She allowed a deep breath of air to fill her lungs, her fingers outlining her ribs beneath the thin chemise, and glided upward, hungry for warmth, hungry for contact. These sensitive pads of her fingers finally rested on the heavy fullness of her breasts, and traced in memory the edge of the corset where her nipples had been exposed in the gazebo. Her senses flamed. She moaned aloud. Charlotte guiltily pulled her hands down. She had to get hold of herself, control her wayward body, as if she could control it any better than she had controlled her chaotic life. She shrugged off her chemise, briefly allowing herself the intoxicating luxury of feeling the breathy touch of a Cornwall winter on her bare skin. Like cool fingers, it crept over her limbs, along the hollow of her throat, to the rigid crests of her breasts, and finally down to her belly. Her fingers, as if following an unspoken command, traced their path downward to her thighs. She could smell the damp earth of the garden, the delicate scents of roses, and something more haunting, more pervasive, the scent of jasmine and man. A sudden ripple of fire sparked through her, fierce and blazing. Charlotte gasped at the force of it. This was his fault. Furious, Charlotte pulled her nightgown from the bed and yanked it over her shoulders, letting it fall over her body like a curtain, blocking out the assaulting rays of the moon. She felt the reassuring tickle of a high collar around her neck, and tied the satin ribbon into a tight bow beneath her chin. She was safe. Then why was she still trembling? Charlotte's emotions were tight as a wire. She had to do something to erase his memory, which had been stamped into every frayed nerve of her body. Desperately, she searched the room for some solace, some relief, then found it. On the table, nestled among the myriad bottles and brushes, sat the ancient music box. Embellished in silver, each side was a delicate enamel portrait of the English countryside. A wistful smile tugged at Charlotte's mouth. Odd that it had been given to her in Africa. Geoffrey had given it to her. Geoffrey. Charlotte clutched the music box and padded to the bed, crawling into the downy cushions, pulling the linen sheets up to her throat. Charlotte cradled the music box in her arms and blew out the last candle. Geoffrey. The grimy face pressed itself into the ridges of the iron fence. Brown eyes winked mischievously through clumps of matted hair that bore equal amounts of dirt and lice through its grimy black strands. A mouth cracked wide with gleeful tongue-wagging delight. There were a dozen children at the fence, all in a noisy, joyful heap. Then they were gone. 8-year-old Charlotte stood before the bars, scowling at the retreating cloud of dust from the distant figures on the dirt road. She stuck out her tongue and instantly tasted the grit of the desert. How she hated this strange country, how lonely she was, allowed to play with no one, especially not the street urchins, who, in spite of their poverty, seemed so happy. She wriggled in her white, ruffled pinafore, now covered with a fine layer of dust. If Mrs. Givens were here, it would be magically exchanged for another. But Mrs. Givens wasn't here. She was thousands of miles away, in England, most probably making a summer fool, brimming with cream and gooseberries. Charlotte licked her lips and tasted sand. She had come with father to the dark continent, to Alexandria, but now he had gone, had abandoned her in this desert fortress for over a month. 3 sets of gates imprisoned her in increasing succession, no less than a jail. She turned back, crossing to the broad-leafed fig tree, and clambered up the limousine porch, mindlessly practicing her Arabic as she mouthed the chilling message of the ancient sign overhead. Any slave who leaves without permission of the master will receive 100 lashes. She skirted into the cool darkness of the ancient Roman villa, passing vestibules that had borne witness to countless ages of brilliance, tyranny, and oppression, and stepped out into the blinding wash of light. Papa would be so proud of her progress. In the courtyard, Charlotte allowed the air, softened by the balm of vegetation, to caress her face. The porticos, gilded with mosaic depictions of the season's animals, flowers, and fruits, glinted from every polished tile. With a squeal of delight, she kicked off her shoes, peeled off her stockings, and leapt into the fish pond. She was in the process of yanking off her pinafore when she saw him in the doorway. The boy was not a servant. He was too dirty. Uncommonly tall and dressed for travel, a dusty burnous revealed only a tousled black head of hair and dark eyes. Charlotte looked about her. They were alone. "Who are you?" "Who are you?" came the cool reply. His voice grated with the onset of manhood, and Charlotte noted wide, bony shoulders beneath the robe. He wasn't moving. He just stood there, an insolent smirk tugging at the lips, not the mouth of a boy or an Arab. Her father had told her stories of a ferocious warrior race spawned from the depths of the Sudan, who had ravaged Khartoum and destroyed the finest army that the British Empire had to offer. They were dervishes summoned by the devil himself. Charlotte was positive that what stood before her was one and the same. Her trembling hand slid to the edge of the pond, curling around a large rock. She saw his gaze flick to her hand, surprise opening deep-set almond eyes. He lifted his chin toward the rock with a disdainful nod. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." She threw the rock and fell. She plunged beneath the water with frightening ease, heavy crinoline billowing about her face. Her lungs gasped for air, but none came, just the clinging fabric pressing into her mouth and nostrils. She couldn't breathe. Suddenly pain stabbed through her scalp, and she was pulled up into the air like a waterlogged cargo. Her braids wrapped around a powerful fist. His laughing face erased any remaining vestige of dignity or fear. "Let me go," she howled. The youth shrugged and complied, letting Charlotte crash onto the tiles in a shrieking, squealing heap. Instantly, she responded with a vicious kick in the shins. Once again, his hand snaked through her braids, holding her well out of reach. Dark eyes flashed as he gasped. "Is this the thanks I get for saving your life?" Shocked to hear the aristocratic precision of the Queen's English, Charlotte stared blankly before his words sank in. "Saving my life? You tried to drown me." She swung at him furiously, but she merely spun like a top. "Aye, and how do you reason that? If you hadn't been here, I wouldn't have thrown the rock, so I wouldn't have slipped. What were you doing in a fish pond in the first place?" "What were you doing in a fish pond in the first place?" Exasperation made his voice rise to a boyish croak. "It's no place for a little girl." "I am not a little girl," she yelped. "Oh, pardon my presumption." He peered deeply into her face as if searching for enlightenment, then smiled evilly. "Ah, but of course, now I see it. The small ears, the beady eyes, definitely more from the monkey family." Her shriek resonated with indignation. "Monkey!" Charlotte wrestled free from his grasp and charged with a new-found fury. "I am not a monkey. Take it back." Just as she knocked her tormentor off his feet, she looked up and saw her father. Battered and gaunt, he was dressed in dirty riding gear, dusted head to foot in a ghastly wash of sand. The courtyard was filling with a sundry crew of servants and soldiers, all slumped with exhaustion, some collapsing in the verdant oasis, dropping gear where they stood. She had never seen anything so wonderful in her life. Rushing into her father's waiting arms, Charlotte enveloped herself in his reassuring embrace. "Did you bring me a present?" Charlotte's eyes eagerly sought for telltale signs of packages in her father's coat, and poked nimble fingers into every pocket. Earnshaw had to stifle a weary chuckle of amusement as she rifled through his belongings with the determination of a little ferret. With a dramatic flourish, he unbuttoned his duster and withdrew a mysterious parcel wrapped in oiled paper. Impatiently, Charlotte ripped into it to find her treasure, a rag doll made of fine Egyptian cotton. Its plump body was encased in a miniature gown. From beneath lemon yarn hair, blue button eyes gazed into Charlotte's mesmerized. She collapsed on the floor with her treasure. "Ah, I see you have met Geoffrey," Earnshaw's voice echoed above her. It was grim. She looked up to see her father unsmiling, nodded in the direction of the boy who climbed to his feet, arranging his desert robes with the ease of a seasoned nomad. Charlotte straightened at the sight of her tormentor. "He called me a monkey," she cried, lower lip quivering. Earnshaw gently tweaked his daughter's chin as he leaned over her. his voice confidential and hushed. "Now, we must be kind to Geoffrey. He has suffered much in his young life." As he redirected his gaze, Charlotte could feel his breath involuntarily catch before he uttered his command with unaccustomed harshness. "Boy, come here." Geoffrey stiffened, dark eyes blazing, meeting Earnshaw's with equal animosity. "I am no boy." His was the snarl of challenge, a young lion untested and unafraid. "I have seen my 16th year, if you haven't forgotten already." Indeed, he towered over most of the men in the courtyard. Charlotte pressed herself into her father's legs. He quizzically bent down, touching the rivulets of water that still ran from her skirts. "My goodness, child, how did you get so wet?" Charlotte pointed an accusing finger before she nestled back into the security of her father's arms. "Geoffrey tried to drown me." Tears began to flow as she gave the finest performance of her young life. "Be quiet, monkey." Geoffrey's gentle order turned Charlotte's tear-stained face towards him. He stood over them, silhouetted in the hazy glow of sun and dust. "I saved your life, as your father saved mine." Geoffrey's last words were clipped with mocking sarcasm. Earnshaw stood to face the lad and offered an outstretched hand. "Then we are equally indebted. It is my sincerest wish that you accept my hand in friendship and love, and that we may live in harmony as a family. I was blessed with daughters and would consider it an honour to call you son." "And I would see you rot in hell first." Earnshaw's hand recoiled in shock. Only the boy's voice betrayed him as it cracked with youthful emotion. "Did you think bringing me here would change my mind? After what I have seen? After what has happened? I have no family. They were murdered in the desert." Earnshaw's mouth tightened. "Geoffrey, I am your family now, whether you desire it or not. You are an Englishman and still under my protection. Be reminded that you are my ward and shall remain so until I see fit to release you." He paused. "Your father would have wished it." "How dare you mention my father's name after what you have done?" Geoffrey shook with such fury that a haze of dust haloed his body. Earnshaw would have retreated, but Charlotte's clinging arms held him firm. He forced his narrow shoulders back, lifting his glare to meet Geoffrey's. "What I have done is save your life, boy. You would have died in the desert had we not rescued you. I must now command your unequivocal loyalty and obedience upon the honour of your father's name." Earnshaw hesitated. "I was hoping that you would find it in your heart some day to call me father." Geoffrey recoiled, his young face wide with pain. "You? Yes, I will be your obedient slave, but your son? Never, for you may deceive others, but you cannot deceive me or your own black heart." Geoffrey strode to Earnshaw, facing down his elder, the supple Arab boots silent on the clay tile, then looked down. Charlotte sat sprawled, her doll in her lap, staring up with curious fascination. The angry glint in his eyes softened. "Salam, little monkey." He turned, robes whipping about him in the desert haze, retreating into the fading sunset, then collapsed against an iron gate. Charlotte thought she had never seen anyone so alone. "Little monkey," echoed from a sky filled with diamonds. Ground was covered with flowers. Birds the colour of gaudy jewels sat perched in the towering fig tree, and teased Charlotte with their taunting cries. "Little monkey, as the most beautiful bird swooped towards her, filling the sky with the enormous breadth of its wings. Charlotte was not afraid, nor was she giddy with joy, for it was taking her to Geoffrey. She threw her arms around its crimson neck and clung effortlessly as it lifted her into the air. Over the desert they flew, over the swaying palms, over the blue ribbon of the Nile, to him. But suddenly She was in the jungle, alone, huge fronds blocking all light from the sky. Fog rose from the ground and brought with it a chilling spectre. She could feel the presence, eyes watching her. Her throat constricted with terror. Where was Geoffrey? Instead, she saw the panther, black as the pit of hell, with eyes that glittered with demonic fire. She wanted to run, but could not. Geoffrey! She needed Geoffrey. She opened her mouth to scream, but none came. The panther lunged. Don't cry, little monkey. Don't cry. Charlotte's eyes sprang open. The inky blackness enveloped her like a living thing, and it had eyes and a mouth. It was so close she could feel its breath on her face as it whispered, I'm here. Charlotte screamed.